think it's far too early. I mean, it is quarter to 12, but it's far too early. Unequal relationships, and by that I mean general relationships, as well as romantic ones, are a bit of a sticky subject. You've got kind of the poster child for inequality, so 50 Shades of Grey. Twilight works there as well, which kind of sold ridiculously well, despite it being, you know, a little bit weird in the sense that, you know, the relationship which is portrayed is not equal. It's kind of fetishizes the entire thing. The woman, whose name I confess not to know, is the man whose name I also don't know. You know, she's pretty much his, well, she's his bitch sexually, but, you know, she's also his financial subordinate, and, you know, he could probably ruin her or make her. That's, you know, kind of the definition of a power imbalance. He flicks his fingers and she comes running, or just, you know. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got works which are, you know, perhaps as well received, or maybe not as well received, because I don't think anything in a long time has been as well received as 50 Shades of Grey, apart from maybe Harry Potter. But are a little bit more icky. So you've got things like slave-master relationships, which fall into, you know, kind of being a little bit weird, little bit. It's one of those things which, you know, they work in fiction, but you know, they wouldn't fly in reality. Which is why it's, you know, it's a pretty established, as far as I'm aware, it's a pretty established subsection of the erotica genre. Incest is arguably a bit more than icky, but, you know, that's also, it has its place. The middle ground is obviously, you know, kind of normal relationships, wherein both parties are, you know, kind of equal. Well, obviously they're equal if they, you know, it's not unequal. Neither are dominant or submissive, but, or they're not hugely so. So, in the Discworld books, Duchess Sybil and Vimes, you know, I can't remember their actual names. In the Discworld book, they fit in neatly. So the Duchess is, you know, Vimes is superior by virtue of actually being a Duchess. He's a filthy commoner. But that doesn't really manifest itself in any way. You could pick up a conversation that they have, or summarise it, and it would be relatively difficult to work out that, you know, one is, societally speaking, or sociologically speaking, the other's superior. Vimes may well crush a werewolf's skull in a couple of occasions, but, you know, Lady Sybil runs a rescue shelter for dragons. That's probably about the same, I would say. I mean, you know, crushing a werewolf skull is one thing, but running a rescue shelter for abused dragons is kind of another level. One of the important things to keep in mind about power differentials is how they actually, you know, they manifest themselves, or how they don't. Roman slaves are not, or were not, likely to shout at their masters for trampling mud throughout the villa. That's a good way to get a whipping, which, you know, I suppose may be the goal of the slave in certain books, but probably not in reality. Nor should an emperor grovel at the feet of a commoner, because you wouldn't. Why? It's pretty important also to keep in mind the opinions of the people who are around the relationship, looking at it. If your emperor is the kind of person, and in the kind of situation where he would grovel at the feet of a commoner, what does everyone else think about that? You know, they're just going to go, oh well, you know, he's the emperor, but, you know, he's fine with that. That's okay. Somehow I doubt that. They might despise him for his utter betrayal of class boundaries, or do they not have a lone singular fuck to give? In slightly more mundane context, and this isn't really that much more mundane, a pair of officers in the military having a relationship, which they probably shouldn't be, because the military aren't big on fraternisation. They're going to have to keep their relationship secret. And, lest they, fuck up and the entire thing comes out and one or both of them is summarily discharged. That's my place. They shouldn't be, if the characters in question are going to have to keep the whole thing a secret. They shouldn't be flirting in full view for everyone, necessarily. The line at which flirting becomes an issue is, very much an arguable thing, but that's the kind of thing that, you would probably want them to avoid that kind of stuff. Suggestions, because eventually someone's going to cotton on, and it might be the point that someone eventually cottons on and, they get their asses kicked, but not necessarily. It's important to realise there are some boundaries that are basically impossible to get over as well, in terms of getting to a happy ending. As far as the military example goes, there's very little possibility they've been done to just solve the issues inherent in that situation. The reason that militaries frown on fraternisation is the whole, the commander may well put the life of his or her partner over the life of everybody else. It makes sense that they would do that, but that's not exactly ideal for a commander who's meant to be pretty objective, really, and know when to stop. There's no way you're going to get around that, and therefore there's no way you're going to really be able to keep them being in the military and keep them in a relationship together. I suppose the notion of them simply leaving the army and living a long and happy life with millions of children, that could work. Probably would work as well, but that might not be a fitting ending. If you've spent if it's about the military, and then all of a sudden the only solution is for them to leave the military, maybe not. How this relates to my project in November, scratch my eyes. I apologise for that train, which I'm sure you can hear. Fucking coal train, coal freighter or something. The character whom I mentioned in my video on character kicking is, initially at least, romantically involved with a man who is considerably older than she is. I haven't put any real thought into specifically how old he is, but mid-20s. She's 16. I'm sure you can imagine that's not ideal. It's one of the big causes of issues between her and her father. Obviously, isn't happy about the entire thing, and I can't imagine many fathers would be. But he's pretty much powerless to stop it. I mean, he can whine and bitch about it, but at the end of the day, she does what she wants. On the other hand, the response of her friends is pretty much that. The power differential is hopefully reasonably evident in their interactions as well. He asks, he gets. It's that simple. Particularly towards the end of the book/relationship, as things start to get kind of darker, she doesn't have a say in the relationship. It's about him, and it's only about him, and it is only ever going to be. This is not one of those relationships which would feasibly end in a happy ending. You could probably twist it to. Say one could probably twist it to, but it would probably come off as a bit forced if you did so. It's not meant to be portrayed as a kind of, happy ever after relationship. probably the only way I could twist it into a happy ending would be to pull a total 180 on the characterization and throw over their personalities in the other direction entirely. Like, sorry about the whole heroin thing. Oh, it's okay, baby. That wouldn't really work. The whole thing really comes down to making sure you think your characters through. I think their relationships through, their interactions, making sure that what they do makes sense for who they are and their situation. If you've got absolutely no idea as to how master-slave relationships, actually worked, platonic or not, or even worse, if you think you know how they work, do some research, find stuff out, and see how well your characters map to the kind of stuff which actually happens. But you could say that for pretty much anything, really.